Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the troubled relationship between Luger, the man behind the Luger pistol, and Paul Mauser, and kind of how this troubled relationship shaped firearms development of the 20th century. So Luger's first name, it looks like George, but the correct pronunciation is something like 𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒕𝒐𝒍𝒔 or something like that. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. I'm just going to call him Luger from here on out. I'll leave the correct pronunciation up to Mauro because I'm sure he knows how to say it. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of people don't know that Luger was actually hired, he was brought on to the Mauser team by the Loewe Group. So the Loewe Group, because of some sort of finagling, they were able to buy the majority of shares in the Mauser company. So they were kind of de facto owners and controllers. Sad thing that Paul Mauser really didn't own. He wasn't super in charge of his own company. So Luger previously worked with Mannlicher, and he was very familiar with the Mannlicher rifle and its designs and kind of the ins and outs, pros and cons of the rifle, which made him the perfect sort of candidate to pull in at the time because there was a arms sort of commission or arms evaluation test going on in Italy. And, of course, you have the Mauser, the Mannlicher, rifles, all competing in Italy for this military contract. And because Mauser's competing against the Mannlicher rifle, Luger's kind of the perfect guy to bring in because he's able to speak fluent Italian and he's able to basically talk about all the bad sides of the Mannlicher rifle and why the Mauser rifle is so good. Because of his previous experience with that, kind of does add some legitimacy behind his opinion instead of just sort of talking just to win the contract. Now, even though Mauser didn't win the Italian military contract, Luger's place within the Loewe Group was still solidified. And over the next few years, Luger working with the Loewe Group, he kind of kept tabs on the Mauser rifle development, as well as developing his own guns along the same lines. He was able to develop a rifle, work on pistol designs, kind of do whatever he wanted while he worked for the Loewe Group. And the Loewe Group, it was sort of a strange thing. They let their employees compete against each other. They liked the little bit of competition, and then they also knew kind of whatever employee won out would be good for the company because, they would own the patents and they'd be able to make money off of it. So Lova was okay with Luger basically taking ideas from Mauser and doing stuff with it. And that kind of backfired on Loewe a little bit. Sometime in 1894, Luger applied and was awarded a patent for the third lug on the Mauser bolt. So that, the third lug that kind of existed in some form or another, maybe experimental or not, some form or another for, many, many years, Luger applied a patent and was awarded this patent. And also in 1894, you have Mauser starting to implement, this three locking lug design. Kind of going from 1895 onwards, he's working on the three lug guns, and then obviously with the German 1898 rifle, it's just all three lugs from then on. So Mauser really did want that third lug, and it existed before. So he was really baffled when he found out that Luger was awarded this patent for it. So a lot of people that worked with Paul Mauser were pretty upset upon hearing about Luger patenting this third lug. It was pretty brazen really for Luger to do this, and so Paul wasn't just going to have that. He wasn't just going to leave it. So Paul actually took Luger to patent court over this. Now, ultimately, this patent case, it went on for many years. And there's a few key things to know about German patent law at the time. So in order for something to be protected, so if a design already exists and then somebody patents it, maybe that didn't actually invent it, usually they wouldn't let that happen. If somebody invented it, they wouldn't let somebody else patent it. But when Luger first actually came out with this batch of 6 rifles, he was experimenting with these 6 rifles in 1894. They had 3 lug designs. Now, when he made these rifles, he actually sent them out to other countries. None of them stayed within Germany. So because of just sort of the wording of the German patent law, those rifles with the third lug was not in use inside of Germany. So therefore, they weren't covered under German patent law protection. So Luger won the case. It's pretty crazy that he was able to win that, even though plenty of people testified on Mauser's side that this existed. They were able to provide examples of bolts that existed well before then that had a third lug. But it's pretty crazy, and Luger won this. So it was 1898 when Luger won the court case. But we're going to step back a couple years back to when Luger found out about Luger's patent in 1894. Pretty much Lova just put their hands up like, whatever. You know, they kind of allowed that sort of thing to happen in the company. And Paul Mauser, he was pretty, you know, justifiably angry at the situation. Like the fact that Lova would sort of let that happen and let somebody basically steal something from him. I mean, he had to pay royalties to Luger for a design that he stole, pretty much. So he's pretty upset about that. And so in 1895, when Paul Mauser is needing to patent a lot of the designs that go into the C96, when he's patenting a C96 pistol, he doesn't patent the C96 pistol in the Loewe Group's name. He patents the pistol in his own name because he figures, you know what, if Luger can do it, I can do it. So he patents the C96 pistol in his own name. Now when he does that, he upsets the Loewe Group quite a lot, right? There's this new cool pistol that he comes up with and he owns the patent. And Lova's like, hey man, you know, what's going on? Like, how are you doing this? And Paul's like, well, you let Luger do it, so I did it. Now it seems a little bitter coming from Paul Mauser, but what it did was give him kind of greater control over the C96 pistol and making certain demands to the Loewe Group. And in fact, the Loewe Group did sort of make certain concessions with him on the C96 pistol. Among the certain concessions was that he would get paid a certain amount per C96 pistol sold, so he'd be able to make money off of it. Secondly, and kind of the most important to the story, is that he restricted C96 production to the actual Mauser Oberndorf factory. He did not let, you know, the Lova factory and later on the DWM factory manufacture the C96 pistol. He restricted the production to his own facility. He wanted his own factory to make it. It was his. Lova agreed to that. So the strong arm move from Mauser, it kind of backfires on him a little bit because, yeah, he does get, you know, control over his C96 pistol and make more money off of it. However, now you have, you know, the Loewe Group and later on DWM not making any money from a pistol and wanting pistol production. They're wanting to be able to produce and make. They want to put their, you know, workers to work. They want to be able to, you know, produce pistols and make money. And without the C96, they kind of have to look elsewhere. And they already have their employee Luger. Now, if you want to kind of learn about the Luger development, you should watch CN Arsenal's video on the Luger development, how it kind of comes from the bore chart. But pretty much you have DWM, you have Lova and DWM not promoting, not backing, not offering any help on manufacturing or, you know, refining, improving the C96 design. And instead, they're putting all of their weight behind what will become the Luger pistol. And you have, you know, the Swiss adopting the Luger in 1900, the German Navy in 1904, and then eventually, you know, the German Army adopting the Luger in 1908. And throughout all those trials, you know, the C96 just keeps losing back to back, you know, from the Luger. So he did get control of his pistol, but sadly his design was pretty dated from the onset. And so you have a pistol like the Luger kind of winning out and winning over his C96 pistol, which, I mean, if he's already sore about the patent, that's gotta hurt, you know, losing out to Luger again, especially because the Luger pistol's not really Luger's design. You know, he just kind of perfected it, or the people that worked with him perfected it. So yeah, it's one of those really neat things because say Mauser never did actually patent the C96 in his own name, you know, we'd probably have a lot more C96s today out there. We'd have C96s, you know, made by Lova and DWM. You'd have, you know, the Loewe Group putting their power behind it. We might have maybe improved C96s, you know, bigger, more widespread adoption of C96. But on the flip side of that, we might not have the Luger pistol, which is pretty cool. And it's nice that we have both today. As collectors, we can collect both, you know, C96 and Lugers. So it's just kind of one of those really interesting things. It's one of those stories that a lot of people don't know about, really, when it comes to, you know, the inside dynamics of, you know, different, you know, high-level employees within, you know, the Loewe Group. So I've invited Mauro Baudino back on the show to talk a little bit more about the relationship between Mauser and Luger. Mauro is the author of some really good books, including Parabellum is Back, and my personal favorite, Paul Mauser, His Life, Company, and Handgun Development. This is a really good book if you would like to know a lot. He's a curator of the Paul Mauser archive, so he has access to a lot of the original documents. He has a wealth of knowledge, and he's pretty much the go-to for any kind of information on Mauser pistol development and stuff that's happening within the Mauser company at this time. So, Mauro, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
I'm feeling really underdressed all of a sudden. Could you tell us a little bit more about what was Luger's first assignments, getting hired on with the Loewe Group and working with Mauser?
In a letter dated the 22nd of October 1891, the Loewe commercial managers 𝒂𝒂 and Oliven wrote to Paul Mauser about the possible rejection of the Mannlicher rifle in Italy and the consequent possibility to reintroduce the Mauser rifle in the competition for the Italian rifle. In the same letter, the two managers introduced to Paul Mauser a new Loewe employee, Georg Luger. Georg Luger was a former Mannlicher employee, and the two managers highlight the fact that Georg Luger was very expert in the Mannlicher design and was the best person to highlight the potential flaw in the Mannlicher rifle design. In addition to that, Georg Luger was fluent in Italian language because he attended the secondary school in Padua, in the north of Italy, that in those days was under the Austrian Empire. So in the end, the two managers suggested Paul Mauser to have Georg Luger visiting Oberdorf in order to become familiar with the Mauser design and help Mauser in pushing his rifle in the Italian competition.
Remembering how Luger tried bribery during the Italian military trial, do you think Luger was somewhat of an unethical businessman?
There is certainly evidence of Georg Luger's unethical behavior. Let's say that we can consider the Georg Luger behavior extremely reckless and borderline. Georg Luger was used to write numerous letters to Paul Mauser, many of them with very little content. The aim of this was to ingratiate Paul Mauser, that was already an influential person in the Loewe Group. In January 1892, Georg Luger was in Italy to follow the test of the rifle. And he wrote a letter dated the 6th of January 1892. And in this letter, without any shame, he described to Paul Mauser his attempt to bribe the wife of a Romanian officer that was in Rome on behalf of Romania in order to follow the Italian test. In the letter, Georg Luger described that he offered jewelry to this lady if she would help him convince her husband to push and accept the Mauser rifle instead of the Mannlicher one.
Do you think that Luger was unethical in his dealings with, Mauser and the patenting of the third lug?
Let me say before we start discussing about the legal case between Paul Mauser and Georg Luger concerning the third lug technical solution, that the Paul Mauser archive preserves copy of the original documents, and we are going to present in this video some of them. The problem with Paul Mauser arose in 1894 when Georg Luger decided to patent on his name a technical solution that was already in use in some of the Mauser rifles. The court decided that it was legitimate to patent this technical solution because the rifles were meant for foreign testing and not for domestic use. Therefore, it was possible for Paul Mauser to patent internally in Germany this new technical solution. This legal loophole sounds like an insult to Paul Mauser. The story is the following. In 1894, Paul Mauser shipped to the Loewe office in Berlin 6 rifles. 3 of them for USA, for testing in USA, and three of them to be shipped to Sir Joseph Jonas in UK, also in this case for testing purposes. The rifle spent a little bit of time in the office in Berlin, where Georg Luger worked, and Georg Luger had the opportunity to analyze these rifles. And because he was very familiar with the Mauser design, he noticed immediately that this third loop solution was not yet patented, and then he decided, let's say without any shame, to patent on his name this technical solution. In 1894, the patent was granted to Georg Luger, and immediately after, Georg Luger started asking money to Paul Mauser for the royalties. The main point we need to discuss is why Loewe accepted this Georg Luger unethical behavior, or in other words, why Loewe accepted internal competition in the company. We think that Loewe accepted internal competition with the aim of manipulate the results. So in the end, Loewe was used to bet on several horses to see which one succeeded. And this with the aim of do not create hegemonic situation in the company, and also to make clear that everyone could be challenged at any time.
So I could see Mauser being really upset after losing his court case to Luger in 1898. What were some of the concessions that Lova made to Mauser to kind of make this up to him?
In order to try to solve this complicated situation, Isidor Loewe himself decided to visit Paul Mauser in Oberdorf. They had a very long and complicated discussion, and at the end, Paul Mauser was able to obtain more freedom for his company inside the Loewe Group, and also a forfeit money to pay the Georg Luger royalties. At the end of this agreement, Isidor Loewe thought that everything was good again, but it is not the case. In fact, in 1895, when the 𝑐96 pistol was ready to be patented, Paul Mauser decided, as a revenge, to patent the pistol on his name. And this opened a new page, a new chapter in this very long story.
Speaking of concessions, what did Paul Mauser get in return for his 𝑐96 patent?
On the 9th of March 1897, there was a board of directors in Berlin, and in this meeting, Paul Mauser requested and obtained two main points. First, that the 𝑐96 pistol was produced only in the Mauser facility in Oberdorf, and second point, to increase the capital of the Mauser company. Paul Mauser thought that was a good deal, what was achieved, but actually the first point, it was a boomerang for Mauser. In fact, DWM, always with this internal competition, because they were not able to produce the pistol in Berlin, they decided to give a mandate to Georg Luger to improve the design of the Borchardt pistol. And we know that Luger succeeded with this, and the Luger pistol won the competition to become the pistol for the German armed forces.
I also remember reading in your book how Luger was fired from DWM eventually in 1919 because of just the constant intellectual property litigation that was going on. I know Mauser wasn't alive at that point, but do you think it would have been pretty happy at that?
It is sure that Paul Mauser hated Georg Luger. This is clearly written in some documents available in the Paul Mauser archive, like diaries and letters. Georg Luger was a very difficult person, and another evidence of this is that in 1919, DWM decided to break the contract with Georg Luger, again, also in this case, for a reason related to the behavior of Georg Luger. So Paul Mauser was not able to see Georg Luger fired by DWM because it's passed away a few years before.
Thanks so much for coming on the show again, Mauro. Really appreciate all the information. You are truly a gentleman and a scholar.
You are welcome anytime.
So even if Mauro never came on the show, I'd highly recommend you checking out his books, especially the Paul Mauser book. If you're a big fan of Luger's, also Parabellum is back if you like, post-war Luger history and post-war Mauser history. So Paul Mauser is a good book, kind of pre-World War II, everything before World War II. And Parabellum is back is a good one, kind of everything after World War II. So I highly recommend checking them out. They're really kind of two sides of a coin. I recommend their books even if Mauro never came on the show. Honestly, they're really good. They're really good books. Mauro also has a certification program for pistols. So if you have like a certain type of vintage, especially like the post-war Lugers, that sort of thing, he can look up the documentation on your gun, and he can give you a certificate, for the history and everything of your gun. So go to his website and check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description. It's a really interesting service, and it's not that expensive compared to like what Colt and Smith & Wesson and all those kind of companies charge. So I highly recommend that. If you guys like this kind of gun history content, let me know. You have to comment and tell me what you think of this stuff, because if you don't comment, I don't know. I read all the comments. So if you just let me know what you think, if you want more guns versus history or whatever, let me know. I appreciate what you guys have to say, and I truly read all the comments and consider everything that you guys say. So appreciate everything, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.